It's 2026 and my favorite guitar amp fits in the palm of my hand. Our amplifiers are changing, and this makes me wonder if real tube amps are a dying breed. For me personally in the studio, I have a hard time using anything but real amplifiers. Let me explain. Welcome to my studio. My name's Jacob Samario, and I own a commercial recording studio called English Oak Recording that I started back in 2018. I've owned a bunch of different amps over the years here at the studio, and my tastes have changed dramatically. Let me show you. This was one of the first proper amps that I bought for the studio. It's a 1976 Fender Bassman, and it's not like the other Bassmans out there. During COVID, I had sent this amp in to get a bunch of work done to it. I got it completely overhauled and serviced to make sure it was 100% ready to go to record in the studio. Previously, I had this really loud hum that came from the amp, and I took it to a tech that had been working on Fender amps for 40 plus years, and he got this thing dead silent, sounding the way it would have sounded when it came out in 1976. My previous studio had an ISO booth, so having a giant amp like that was kind of fun. You could just turn up the amp as much as you wanted to, but in this space, everything is contained inside this room. So when I moved here about 4 years ago, I realized I don't really want an amp cranked to 10 in the same room that I'm trying to, assess the recording in. That's where this amp came in. This is the Amp by Milkman Sound. And I know what you're saying, Jacob, that's a guitar pedal, that is not an amp. But this is a fully capable amplifier in a guitar pedal format. Let's take a moment to talk about what this amp can do. You can see all this I/O on the back. It can run a 4, 8, or a 16 ohm cab. It has a balanced line out that has a cab simulator built in that you can turn off or on. Or you can also just run this as a pedal if you want to take advantage of the EQ, the reverb, and the trim. One of the coolest things about this amp is that if you wanted to run it as a pedal, let's say you were using it just for the reverb and the trim, and your main amp gave out on you during a gig or during sound check, you would have a backup amp that lives directly on your pedal board. I don't really think there's many other products out there that covers as many bases as this amp. At this point, you're probably thinking that this is a sponsored video, but I've owned this for about 3 to 5 years now. I think I bought it maybe right before I was moving into this room, and I got it used off of Reverb for like 350 bucks, 400 bucks, something like that. But yeah, this is just one of the most capable amps out there, and that's why I have it here at my studio. Whether I choose to use the Fender Bassman or the Amp by Milkman Sound, I still have the same problem. There's a loud amp in the same room that I'm in. To try and solve this, I decided to step out of my comfort zone and try something I was against for many years: impulse responses. But I wasn't sure if it sounded any better than a cab being mic'd up in the room. Here was my plan. I wheeled the cab to another room here at the studio. I ran a 100-foot long speaker cable to that cabinet. This would allow me to have the head of the amp in the room with me, so I could make any adjustments I wanted to without having to be blasted by the amp. And the amp that I chose to run to this cab was the Amp by Milkman Sound. And that's because it both has a speaker out and a line out on this amp. So I can use the exact same head for both the impulse response and the recording of the cabinet in the room. To mic up the cabinet, I used one of my favorite dynamic mics, a Shure SM57. But this wasn't a normal 57. This is a vintage, made in the USA Unidyne 3 57. For the impulse response, I captured the line out from the amp with the cab sim turned off. Now both the 57 and the line out from the amp were going into an API 512V, so they're both being captured by the exact same preamp. For an added layer of consistency, I decided to record an electric guitar part DI into Pro Tools that I then reamped into these two different rigs. I'm using 100% the exact same performance through the impulse response and through the actual cabinet in the room. Now I guess there's only one last thing to do to see which one sounds better. Let's listen to the first track. Now let's listen to the second track. Now one more time, alternating between the two. All right, I'm gonna give you a couple more seconds to place your guesses down in the comments below. Now, if you preferred the top track, that was the amp. And the bottom track, amp B, was the impulse response. If you look here at the top track, the one that was the actual amp in the room, you can see that the waveform overall is a lot more consistent, a lot more controlled, almost as if there's some sort of compression or saturation going on. If you look at the impulse response, which would be captured from the line out of the amp, you can see that it is a lot more dynamic, even though the settings on the amp are the exact same. And overall, I thought that the amp was a bit darker, which makes sense because the speaker is a lot older and it's also a completely different speaker than the one we used in the impulse response. I'm using a V30 because that's one of my favorite speakers. Are tube amps dying? Personally, I don't think so. I think they're important now more than ever. I also don't think that impulse responses are going to completely erase the need for a real amp in the room. If anything, it seems like there's more ways to record electric guitar now than ever. No matter how you choose to record your electric guitar, there's one thing that all of us can agree with in the studio. If it sounds good, it is good.